So recording now, I guess.
Okay, so we can always edit whenever the start goes. So whenever we take a breath, we can just get going.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Brenda Ahenkra. I'm the CEO and founder of My Well Self. We are a tech-enabled, wellness-focused care navigation platform, helping to remove the friction and barriers when it comes to accessing wellness treatment. I'm extremely excited to have Tara. Can you pronounce your last name for me again?
Tourloukis.
Tourloukis. I didn't want to mispronounce that. Thanks for that. We're joined by Tara, who is an RN psychotherapist. She is the founder and owner of The Wellness Nurse, and we're here and very excited to speak to her on general information about RN psychotherapist. So thank you, Tara, for joining us today.
You're so welcome. Excited.
Wonderful. So we have some general questions for you. I'm super excited because I did not know that there was such a thing as RN psychotherapists. I was aware of psychotherapists, but I didn't know there was a whole other category. So I am personally very stoked to learn more about your profession and how you help the community. All right.
That's awesome.
So I'll just start off by asking you to please introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Tara Tourloukis, and Brenda's right. I'm an RN psychotherapist, and I founded The Wellness Nurse, which is just me for right now. And I work and I have a private practice in Kincardine, Ontario, seeing people in person in the office and virtually across the province for
Wonderful.
therapy.
How long? Okay, great. Sorry, I cut you out there. How long have you been practicing for?
So overall, I've been a nurse for 19 years. Most of that's been in mental health. In almost any area of mental health, if you can imagine, I've worked there. The last decade, I've spent sort of in an outpatient mental health role doing therapy, amongst other things. And last year, I decided to sort of take the plunge into private practice. So in terms of a therapy role, I've been doing it for about a decade, private practice just since last year.
Okay, and I'm just curious to know what was the journey to becoming an RN psychotherapist?
Yeah, so like I said, so I've been a nurse for 19 years. It's hard to believe, next year will be 20 years.
Yeah.
And the majority of that has all been in mental health, sort of
Okay.
inpatient, outpatient, and then outpatient mental health. I love mental health, and I particularly have always sort of had a soft spot for psychosis and psychotic illness, and that's sort of where my real interest lies. And over the past decade have done a lot of work individually and doing some groups, and sort of also in the metabolic monitoring sort of area. As you may or may not know, some psych meds are not kind to our bodies, and so
Right.
yeah, being a nurse is really important to sort of look at everything, right? So the journey to becoming an RN psychotherapist sort of just happened almost naturally, just in terms of progression of my employment and sort of my career journey. In terms of private practice, there were a lot of things that I saw that didn't feel good or weren't working really well in a system that I was working in previously. And so I, thought to myself, there has to be a better way, right? There has to be a better way to reach people that really need it. And I don't have to tell them they have to wait 18 months to get that, right?
Yeah.
Like it was just continuously didn't feel good. So that's sort of how I landed where I am today.
That's a great story. I like that. And so what qualifications does one need to be an RN psychotherapist? Like that title itself, how do you get to that point?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I get asked that question a lot, actually. And I think we may cover this in a couple of minutes, but every registered nurse in Ontario is registered with the College of Nurses of Ontario. So that's sort of our regulatory body. For the last couple of years, the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, which is not a regulatory body, which is a volunteer sort of organization, an association that nurses can be part of, has been working on practice standards in terms of doing psychotherapy. Under the Regulated Health Professions Act, which is provincial legislation, if you are a member of one of 6 colleges, then you can provide the controlled act of psychotherapy. So there are 14 controlled acts under the RHPA. One of them is psychotherapy. Since we're still sort of working on concrete practice standards, any nurse who performs any controlled act under our sort of college registration, you need to have the skill, knowledge, and judgment to do so. So many of us have a background in mental health, have a
Right.
master's degree. I have a master's of psychiatric nursing,
Okay.
starting a PhD in September.
Wow.
Yeah, nursing
On
PhD.
top of seeing patients, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So as long as we, and like I said, with any other controlled act, as long as we have the training, the knowledge, the skill, the judgment to do so, then we can perform that controlled act. So
Okay.
given my education, given my almost 2 decades of mental health nursing experience, I
Right.
certainly feel very confident in this area to offer this. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so that I don't, that was sort of a really long-winded answer
No, no, no. It
to your
helps. It
question.
helps me personally because I said before I did not know that this
Mhm,
group particularly existed. So I'm just curious to know. And
mhm.
and with that, just to but the next question is how is an RN psychotherapist different from, I guess I don't know if the word is regular psychotherapist, but how are they different?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. All your questions are good questions, I should say. I can't
Oh,
lead with that with every
it's
question, but
just a curious mind, honestly.
no, it's a
But
great
thank you,
question.
thank you.
And
Mhm.
so in terms of registration, there
Mhm.
are the big difference is that we typically are registered with the College of Nurses of Ontario only. We could choose to
Okay.
be registered with another regulatory body that regulates psychotherapists. However, it's not
Right.
required because the provincial legislation outlines that anybody who falls under the CNO is permitted to perform psychotherapy. So that's
Okay.
one way that we're different, is that
Mhm.
we belong to a different college. We
Mhm.
are registered. That's often one of the questions that people ask. And
Right.
nurses practice autonomously, which means our education sort of
Mm.
provides us with the foundation to do
Right.
these controlled acts autonomously, right? As long as we have that piece, that skill, knowledge, and judgment piece.
Okay. 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 So what I'm hearing is number one, if I again I'm getting a little technical, if I were to ever want to look for a license number, they would be in different places.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the nurses, in a sense, have a more overall approach. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we
Is
do
that fair to
actually.
say? Okay.
Yeah,
Not not
and
not to not to say anything against the psychotherapist, but just
that's
there it
right.
sounds like there's a bit of an overall approach here.
Yeah, and when I do answer this question, because people will say, well, what makes you stand apart, right? What makes you different?
Right.
And I often think about that to myself. I think to myself, in the hundreds of therapists that somebody has to choose from,
Right.
what would make me or any other nurse psychotherapist stand out, right? And
Right.
there's a couple things that make us sort of different, not that any, just different. We come to the table with different education, different skills, and
Right.
different abilities. So one of those things is that the majority of us have worked in the healthcare field, right? And so when people come to us and perhaps they have questions about healthcare or healthcare navigation, we're pretty familiar with that, right?
Right.
Particularly the mental health care system, right? People say, well, I need to see a psychiatrist. How do I do that, right? I need a med review. How do I do that, right? So we're knowledgeable about the healthcare system and healthcare system navigation, certainly the mental health system, which can be a bit frustrating. Um,
Right.
Nurses also, I mean, you're right, at a baseline, we have knowledge around the body system and
Right.
physiology, and that's really important when we're talking about, things like mental illness, right?
Yes.
What does schizophrenia mean? What does depression mean? And how does it affect my body, right? How do my meds, what are the side effects of my medication,
Yes.
right? And so we're not pharmacists and we're not physicians. However, so many times people will come and say, I just got prescribed this medication. I'm not really sure
If it's working
what,
for me.
yeah, or how come I'm gaining all this weight, right? I don't really understand. So,
Yeah.
nurses are really positioned to have these really good conversations as they relate sort of to the whole picture. And you're right, that's how nurses, we practice sort of from a holistic picture,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because that's sort of what nurses are trained to do.
Yeah.
And then integrating all of that sort of into the therapy role. Um, the other big thing I think, and a large portion of my caseload is made up of healthcare workers or frontline workers. And I
Okay.
consistently sort of get this feedback that people say, I don't need to explain it to you, right? You know what a 12-hour shift is like. Believe it or not, I've worked on the floor. It's been a while, but I have
Right.
worked sort of at the bedside. So people
Right.
say, when I throw out all the acronyms, I don't need to stop and sort of explain it to you. I can just keep going because you know what that means. And I think
Right.
that sort of connection feels really important to a lot of people, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
nurses do come to the table with a couple unique pieces to
Yeah.
add to that.
That's a great explanation. Thank you.
Mhm.
Again, that's why I was excited to hear more
Yeah.
about your approach. That's wonderful.
Mhm.
Okay, so next question is, when would someone come to see you? When would someone sit down and say, okay, you know what, I need to discover more about seeing an RN psychotherapist?
Well, hopefully before there's a crisis, I guess.
Hopefully so. Yes,
Yes.
hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I would certainly encourage anybody, if you're looking for therapy, don't wait until the crisis point, right? If you're
Yes.
feeling, certainly if you have a new diagnosis of a
Mhm.
mental illness, or somebody, maybe a physician has said to you, I'm going to put you on this medication. I'm a little bit
Mhm.
concerned about your mood or some of
Right.
this, what I see around anxiety. Um, I see some people with chronic pain or chronic health conditions, and sometimes that creates, or new chronic health conditions, right? Sometimes that can create
Mhm.
a real sense of anxiety around, how do I manage this now? My whole life has changed, right? Or my child's been diagnosed with this chronic
Right.
illness, and now what do I do, right?
Right.
So at any point sort of in your life journey where you think you need some support, and you don't need a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, right? I mean, most people, we will at some point struggle with something in our lives, and
Right.
that's a great time to come for therapy.
Okay, so it's just being number one. Sounds like what I'm hearing is to be proactive in your care too, as well, not to
Always.
wait to that last moment, and then
Mm-hmm.
know again that what you guys bring to the table in terms of your
Mm-hmm.
care. Okay, so I always love to present this question. What are some myths that you want to dispel about RN psychotherapists? I love to ask this question because I just love to hear the answers.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
so what are some myths you want to dispel today?
So I guess the biggest myth people, well, first of all, people say nurses can't do therapy. Tell me
Hmm,
I can't do something, and I'm going to show you I can do it, right?
absolutely.
And certainly we can. Not all nurses, and I often come back with, I'm not trained. You do not want me in the emergency room because I'm not
Right,
going to be very skilled, and
right.
people are probably not going to do well under my care. However, the emergency room nurses take the time to do their training and their education and build their skills, and they're incredibly equipped to do their job, right? And
Right.
nurses in a therapy role, we're the same, right? So we've taken that time to do the education, build up our skills, and we're equipped to do the job. So
Okay.
if we look at there's so many specialties in nursing, and this is one. This is just one, right?
Right. Right.
So yes, nurses can. And the other thing sometimes I get is, but you're not registered with sort of, this other college that registers
Right.
psychotherapists, and that's okay, right? Um,
Mm,
there are 6 colleges in the province whose members can perform the controlled active psychotherapy. So that's sort of another myth, right? We maintain our registration with the College of Nurses, and
mhm.
that's who we're responsible to ensure that we have the skill, knowledge, and judgment to do what we're doing.
Okay, great. And essentially, they're overseeing you guys to make sure that you guys are trained to be able to call yourself an RN psychotherapist. So we should trust
That's
that.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah,
can trust that. Yeah,
absolutely.
that's
Mhm,
wonderful. Okay, that's
mhm,
great. So now, someone has sought you out
mhm.
and they're interested in seeing you as an RN psychotherapist. So yeah, I see the little notification there. Let's turn that off. Let me do that. Okay, there we go. 1 second. There we go. So someone has sought you out. They're ready to come and see you. What would a typical initial session look like with you?
So an intake appointment, we'd certainly review sort of the intake forms, do all the housekeeping things, right?
Mhm.
We'd look at sort of consent and everything like that. And again, just going back to, nurses are really good at sort of looking at the big picture. Symptoms are important, diagnoses are
Mhm.
important, and some of the basic things are really important too, right? Are you sleeping? Are you drinking water? Are you eating? And sometimes people say, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it has a
Right.
lot to do with it, because how are we going to build skills and learn how to manage emotions or regulate emotions better if you haven't slept and you don't drink any water and you've had 19 cups of coffee, right? So let's take a
Fair
look
enough.
at sort
Yeah.
of really the basic things. And how's your housing, right?
Right.
Are you getting evicted? Are you constantly in this fight or flight
Mm.
sort of, right? So I think I would like to say that nurses are really good at sort of looking at the big picture, and then kind of, going down from there and saying, okay, well, let's look at what the treatment plan is going to look like then, right? What are the things that we're going to focus on?
Okay, so like a full intake, full overall
Mm-hmm.
understanding of what the person's coming in with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
And with that, tell us some common things that you see, issues, concerns that you see coming into your specific practice.
So, like I said, a lot of my clients are frontline workers or
Yeah.
work sort of in the
Yeah.
hospital or the healthcare system, not all nurses, certainly. So
Right.
some sort of moral distress, anxiety symptoms.
I would imagine burnout too as well.
Yeah, for sure. We
Okay.
do have discussions around burnout and sort of, what the research says around that and
Mm,
ways to manage. A small percentage are people with a diagnosed mental illness, right? So,
okay.
bipolar, certainly people that are managed well, um, depression, and then people that fit into that category of chronic health issues or chronic pain, right? And whether it's new or whether it's long standing, people who are saying, I'm feeling really anxious about this, right? Or I'm really struggling to manage my mood because my whole life has changed now. So that's sort of what people might come to me with.
Okay. Okay, great. And the next question is, and I love this answer this one too as well, or ask this one as too as well, is what question do you get asked the most? Now you may have asked that before, but
Mhm.
when someone comes and see you, what's the number one question, or maybe number two question that you get asked the most?
From clients, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. People that come
Oh.
to see you for the first time, or they're looking to get on their mental health journey. What kind of
Mhm.
questions come to you that it's most frequently said to you?
Um, how can we fix this? How
Yeah,
can we
how
manage
can we
this?
fix this?
Sort
Yes.
of the biggest question,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that makes sense, especially since they've made the choice to come and see you
Mhm.
right away. Okay,
Mhm.
so we're almost towards the end,
Mhm.
and I think I want to ask this question is to kind of set the expectation for when someone comes in to see you. So the next
Yep.
question is, when someone comes to see you as an RN psychotherapist,
Mhm.
what outcomes or improvements can they expect to see with time? Obviously, assuming that they're dedicated and they're focused and
Mhm.
they're working collaboratively with you. What outcomes
Mhm.
would you generally expect to happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Certainly a shift, right? I mean, we all have everything's on a scale, right? We all have a
Yes.
scale of, mental wellness and, ideally we'd like to see a shift in that. And whatever sort of the treatment plan is, right? A shift in mood, are we learning to regulate emotions? Are we learning how to manage our distress, in situations? Are we learning interpersonal skills, right?
Right.
And so I guess what people are looking for is a shift in wellness, a shift in mood, and some skill building, right? So we talk about, putting tools in our toolbox to manage distress, to manage emotional regulation, whatever sort of that piece is. And however we're doing that, whatever modality we're sort of using to do that. So that would be ideally
Mm,
a positive shift.
positive shift. Yes, we're all
Hmm.
hoping for that, definitely. And then last but not least, I just want to confirm
Hmm.
that RN psychotherapists are covered under insurance plans, are they?
Some they are, yeah, you bet. Some are, and some have not. We sort of, as a group and the RNAO, have been doing an incredible amount of advocacy and work with insurance
Mm,
companies. So this sort of change in terms of the RHPA came about in 2017. Uh, Psychotherapy was declared.
yes.
Uh, yeah, changed the RHPA changed in 2017, and some insurance companies have not sort of changed their policies to reflect
Mm,
that. So some are covered, some are not. We are doing sort of as a group, as a whole, um, in sort of different areas, are doing a lot of work and advocacy to help insurance companies recognize that
yes.
the provincial legislation exists for a reason. So can we reflect this in the benefits packages?
That's great. So I know, yeah, at least from my experience, they break it down into different types of
Right.
providers, but I think some people might have the benefit of a health spending account. So
Yes.
you are a
Yes.
qualified practitioner, so they
Hmm.
maybe slip you in there through that way too as well.
Yes.
Just a reminder to
Yeah.
people, because I
Yeah.
tend to do that too as well.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
true.
we're at the end of our session. Tara, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Tara, again, is an RN psychotherapist. She's the founder and owner of the Wellness Nurse out in Kincaid, I believe.
Incarnate.
Sorry, sorry.
Mhm.
So go ahead and please be more aware of her and be more aware of what RN psychotherapists bring to the table. So thanks for joining us today, guys. Bye.
Take care.